Welcome back to the show. We're going to be looking at more of the interesting questions in the state of the ColdFusion Union survey this year. And if you missed the last episode where we looked at 24 of those questions and had a lot of interesting info there on different things developers are doing, you can find that on the TerraTech blog. And coming up, we're going to be looking at how people are using mobile development. What is keeping people doing ColdFusion, or what is stopping them doing it in their companies, and caching solutions people are using, framework tools, monitoring tools, deployment methods people use, what the popular REST APIs are, and also what kind of salary range people have in the ColdFusion world. And we're also looking at some somewhat controversial questions on how people are locking down their servers and how many of us admit to being hacked in the last few years. So, and how that happened.
Sounds intriguing.
And then also, it is intriguing. Yes, that's coming up in this episode. And then also we're going to look at online ColdFusion communities where you can meet other CF developers and get your questions answered, and which are the most popular, and how you spend your time hobby versus professional coding. And also we're going to have a look at some of the comments people made. Lots of comments were made on this survey, and there's some controversial things being said in there that we'll get to.
That's my favorite part.
I'm here with Brad Wood. Absolutely. I'm here with Brad Wood from Autis Solutions. He's the evangelist for the whole box line of products.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely, every time. And just so you know, Brad helped out with improving the questions on this survey and analyzing the results. So he's a great all-round guy. You can meet him at the upcoming Into the Box conference that's coming up real soon now.
Very nice. So,
yeah. Well, I like to plug it just because it's like, helping keep ColdFusion alive. It's the modern face of ColdFusion, if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, you should trademark it or something. So let me share the screen so we can have a look at the first question on mobile development. And here it comes. So what kind of mobile development frameworks are developers using? And of course, the number one answer is they're just not doing mobile development.
Yeah, it's actually, I guess maybe it's not too surprising. I kind of thought more people would be doing mobile dev. I'm kind of curious if this is a reflection more of the companies that are represented by the survey.
Yeah, maybe, or, I don't know that. I mean, first of all, people taking the survey tend to be the people more active in online forums, or on the TerraTech email list, or maybe follow people on Twitter. And, I think a lot of ColdFusion developers just do their 9-to-5 job and don't really spend time on forums. So,
yeah. I'm honestly a little surprised at just the amount of people still doing native iOS and native Android. Maybe this is just a personal thing. I would never really consider that in favor of, some of the cross-platform solutions like PhoneGap, pretty much any other solution that's not native. But I suppose maybe a lot of companies are willing to, give the giant, proverbial middle finger to all Android users and say we're only supporting iOS. I wouldn't think that many people would be doing that these days. But I did want to also.
What would the point be? You just first of all, the same number of people are pretty much doing native iOS as native Android, which, we don't know for sure, but it kind of suggests that they're doing both.
That's possible. It seems like a lot more work, given they could write their app once with one of these sort of cross-platform ones. I wanted to point out in the responses, it looks like next year we definitely need to add Xamarin as well as React Native. We had a lot of write-ins for both of those. So that's good to know. Now, the other group is still only maybe 10%, but it looked like a fair number of those were using Xamarin and React Native.
Yeah. And the most popular one is PhoneGap. Do any of these your personal favorites, or?
CF Client, Michael.
CF Client, okay.
Of course, CF Client, was just a wrapper around PhoneGap. I don't find that very surprising. I think it's kind of one of the biggest ones. I would say PhoneGap probably personally, but I have yet to do very much mobile development at all. So at Ortus, we are doing some, but I haven't been personally involved in it.
Cool. So let's go on and look at question 26. What aspects of ColdFusion are keeping you or your company using it? And here we get into some interesting stuff.
Yes, we do. So I think the biggest one by far, I think, is rapid development, followed by prior investment in ColdFusion, which is interesting. Prior investment in CF is too large to rewrite. Is the next one.
Yeah, and that's going to work for any language that's been around for a while.
Yeah, fast to learn, easy to integrate, less code.
Yeah, a lot of people have mentioned that to me when I've talked to them, that, they just can write. They know plenty of other languages, but they can do it a lot quicker in ColdFusion.
Sure, yeah.
And even fun to code in is pretty popular too, which, we don't always rate that as when we pick a coding language, but like if something is tedious to code in, do you really want to be doing it?
I think in reality that is a large draw, especially for people who pick up language in their free time. If it's not something that's, fun and to write in, they're probably not going to keep doing it.
And then
comments here.
And then a fair number of people put good performance, and actually that's surprisingly true because, in the ColdFusion engine inside the server, there's a lot of tweaking around that gets multi-threading and other stuff that gets a lot of throughput to go through a site. So
yeah, and I don't find it too surprising. Personally, the JVM has been well proven as a platform that scales, exceptionally well. Twitter, had a big write-up when they switched from Ruby on Rails to the JVM in Java. They were able to have a lot fewer servers and support a lot higher traffic. And so, that's why I always tell people ColdFusion is a JVM-based language. Because the JVM, in my opinion, is already a good thing as far as deployment and speed.
Well, and there's many different versions of the Java virtual machine that are made, so it's going to be around for decades.
I like the built-in features as well. I think that's one of the things I tend to talk about when I talk to non-ColdFusion programmers.
Yep.
I talk about the fact that CFML is a platform that comes out of the box with just a whole slew of integration, and things that are packaged in. So I personally like that one. In fact, I think I probably voted for it when I took the survey.
Yeah, and you can write the same thing in PHP or .NET or whatever, but you're probably going to end up adding third-party libraries in. And if anyone who's added a third-party library, you're kind of rolling the dice as to whether it's going to work out immediately, or you're going to have to tweak around with it, or it's the compatibility issues. So it's certainly a big help when things are built in.
Sure, yeah, and ColdFusion, incorporates a large number of open source Java libraries, but they've gone through the effort to make sure they're all going to work cohesively together. You don't have to worry about that, which is a good thing.
And then works with many different databases is what I believe this one is, which, some people need to move around between databases, and that's certainly a good thing. And then also that, you can run it open source. You can run with Lucy, CFML, and you can set up a whole stack that's completely open source using ColdFusion.
Yeah, and that's actually a fairly good number. 33% of respondents saying that, open source engines, which effectively I think are going to be, mostly Lucy, to a much lesser extent Rilo, and to an incredibly small percent OpenBlue Dragon, are essentially what's helping keep them on the platform. I think that speaks well to those, because those are all potentially people that may have moved on if they didn't have those open source offerings available to them.
Yeah. So here we've got 12 or more really good reasons to keep on using ColdFusion. Great to see that. And thanks for the suggestion that someone made last year to have this question in the survey.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the opposite side of the coin, the dark side. Yes, we come to the dark side. What aspects of ColdFusion are preventing you or your company from embracing ColdFusion, which is question 27 in the survey?
Yeah, so the biggest one by far is seen as dying in legacy, which is sad because that's really completely perception. It's not a fault of the language itself or what you can build with it. It's really just a giant perception issue. I think that's what drives a lot of the, CAO, CTO, types away. Who'll come in and think, let's use .NET, right? That's, nobody got fired for, buying Microsoft, as the saying goes.
Hmm.
I think that's one of the biggest issues that we need to try to fix as a community is just the perception of ColdFusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the answer says, it's seen as dying or legacy. It's not that it actually has died,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's not that it, I don't know quite what the word legacy means, whether it just means the code being around for a while or what. But, I see some really modern and exciting things happening in ColdFusion code. And I know in, the conference you're speaking at, there's a lot of modern ColdFusion coding techniques that people are doing. So it's cutting edge. But we need to get the word out there that yes, it is alive and it can be modern code. I mean, sure, you can write old style code in it, and you may be maintaining mountains of old style code if you're lucky.
Sure. Well, I mean, I run across people that are already ColdFusion developers who aren't aware of the tooling and resources available. Imagine that issue amplified even more in the communities of people who aren't even doing ColdFusion. I think there's a lot of misconception on what modern
Oh,
looks
yeah.
like.
Well, and I think sometimes, I've seen people in other, Java or PHP communities who they're talking about ColdFusion 5 and not ColdFusion 2016 or Lucy 5, and they make all these accusations that are kind of straw man arguments that aren't even true.
Yeah. So here's actually a response. Here's a write-in response on this question. Lack of command line sucks. So here's the irony. Command Box, which is precisely that, a command line tool for ColdFusion, has been around for 3 years now. And here's a member of the ColdFusion community who literally is 3 years or more behind. They've had a command line for 3 years and they apparently don't even know it.
And what is the cost of Command Box? For those who don't know,
it is absolutely free, Michael.
Exactly. So there should be no reason to be not using that. So you can get the benefits of spinning up servers and different versions of ColdFusion and all the other command line things you can do. And I was talking with Gert the other day, who's part of the Lucy initiative, and they're working on in the next dot release speeding up how quickly it loads.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you use it command line, it can do it twice as fast.
Exactly. Yeah. When you run a command from the command line, there's a little bit of loading in the background. So the next biggest thing, difficulty of finding CF developers, which is interesting because we have both sides of that coin. We have difficult to find CF work and difficult to find CF developers, and both of those have a decent amount of votes. But it looks like there's more people looking for developers. Which, I mean, that's good for developers, right? That means that's a hiring market.
Yeah.
And we talked about this last time, I think, how, a lot of people, I think, need to stop looking for developers, stop limiting their searches to only applicants who already know ColdFusion, but to look for qualified developers that know a similar scripting language, Ruby, Java, .NET, PHP, and simply, train them on the specifics of ColdFusion. I think they'd be able to fill a lot more seats that way. But that's interesting to know that that's a big issue. And I've heard the same thing from clients of mine as well.
Well, and also don't limit your search to people who happen to live in the same town that you're based in.
True. Yeah, there's a lot of remote availability, people that would work remotely, but it's not always an option.
Yeah.
And so unfixed bugs is sort of the next biggest one, which is kind of interesting. I know that can be, personally frustrating when you've submitted a bug, maybe 2 or 3 years ago and it's still sitting around a bug tracker. I think there's 2 prongs for that. We don't know if the people who answered that were referring to the Adobe bug base or the Lucy bug base. Obviously, there's nothing that you or I can do to fix, Adobe bugs other than voting and, and commenting and pointing them out. I think it's worth pointing out that, if there are unfixed bugs in, Lucy server, at least that's something the community has the ability to, to fix on their own terms, to be able to submit pull requests and things. So at least there's there's reprieve available for people using the open source engines. They have the ability to help contribute in that area.
Yeah, and lobby directly to the people who might be able to help. If you have a
Yeah.
relationship with some of the people who do the committing to that code base, you can convince them why it's important
So,
to fix it, and you can help with debugging it to make it
mhm.
easy for the fix to happen.
So
Even throw.
on this topic, it's probably worth talking about how people can push for bugs to be fixed.
Mhm.
So for Lucy specifically, um, the product manager now is Patrick Quinn of WebApper. He's been pushing us for monthly sprints inside of Lucy, and so he starts a thread on our discourse forum, which by the way is where we just moved our Google Groups to discourse. And if there's bugs that you want to see fixed, he does look to see what votes are on bugs. So that's important, but also pointing that out in the discourse forum and tagging him and saying, can this be part of an upcoming sprint, is the way to get something kind of flagged for Lucy. For Adobe,
Right.
for Adobe,
So
they
and just to encourage people there, it helps if you explain why this would benefit other people and not just yourself.
sure,
Why it's an important bug to fix. And then the other thing is, if you have other friends who are having issues with the same bug, get them to comment too. Do a little grassroots outreach and get some encouragement. If you have several people saying, "Yeah, let's fix this. Here's why," it's far more
absolutely.
likely to get
Yeah.
fixed. The
Every
squeaky
once in a
wheel
while,
gets
I'll
fixed.
see somebody say, why has this bug have not been fixed for either Adobe or Lucy? And I'll look and I'll say, well, there's 0 tickets. There's 0 votes on the bug,
Mhm.
right? So for starters, find some people to vote on it, right? And
Yeah.
so the equivalent for Adobe, they do have voting on their bug tracker. I only assume they look at it since I'm not as involved in their process. I'm not sure. But for people who aren't on the CFML Slack team, there's an Adobe channel in there, and Anit Kumar Panda is in there, and a lot of people come on him and they'll tag him and say, hey, can you follow up and see if there's a status on this bug? And so that's a good way if you have a ticket in the Adobe bug base to kind of get a push in that area. Obviously, they can't fix everything all the time, but I think those are kind of 2 good things that people can follow if they have bugs in either engine that they'd like to kind of light a fire under.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. And I just want to appreciate both Adobe and Lucy for having public bug databases because, well, I think Lucy's always had one, but as did
Yeah,
Rilo.
but Adobe.
Adobe didn't used to have this, and they started it, I think, 10 years ago, I want to say, maybe 8 or 9. After we started that CF Bug Hunt site when the wonderful ColdFusion MX, i.e. ColdFusion 6 came out and was slightly
Yeah,
buggy, if you remember
yeah.
ColdFusion 6.
I do remember ColdFusion 6.
Yeah, which was a shame because ColdFusion 5 was incredibly reliable. Damon Cooper at Adobe, when he was still there, he had this thorough, QA process. And I think that's been recreated at Adobe, where whenever someone reported a bug, they asked them for a copy of their code, and then they'd stick that in their code repository so that, like a new version of ColdFusion would get run through the same code that had bugs before, so they wouldn't, come back as zombie bugs, right? So
Yes.
lots of good stuff. All right, should we move forward to the
Let's go ahead.
next question? So question 28, what caching solutions are people using? So number 1 caching solution, cache. Of course, that comes built in.
Yeah, and to an extent, the Rilo Lucy cache is sort of the same answer. By default, so I guess it's important to note that Adobe ColdFusion has cache built in for like the CF cache tags, the cache get, cache put functions. Lucy and Rilo have a bit more built onto that. They kind of have a caching mechanism where you can create multiple named caches that point to some sort of internal or external data store. So Rilo and Lucy offer to you cache as well as Adobe ColdFusion built in, and they also have a RAM cache option, which just stores it in memory in the heap. So I guess it's not surprising to see that both of those options are sort of, by and large, the most common use since they require 0 additional effort. They just kind of come out of the box.
And that's on Lucy, this cache external, I guess, is what you're talking about.
No. Lucy server has built-in cache in the same manner that Adobe ColdFusion does out of the box, right? Now, Cachebox, of course, well, I was going to say it's not a caching implementation of its own, but actually it is. It does support an in-memory cache. The Cachebox, in a similar fashion that Rilo and Lucy are, is also an aggregator that allows you to connect to external cache stores. So people using Cachebox could quite possibly be connecting to Memcached or to Couchbase or to, a JDBC store. Obviously, we can't tell from that, but it's interesting to see the breakdown here.
And just for people, people who aren't doing caching, which seems to be about half the people who took this survey, perhaps, so it's multiple choice, so maybe that's a deceptive number. But what kind of things would you want to cache in your application, and what kind of effects might you expect to see?
Yeah, so I mean, caching is kind of one of the go-to patterns and strategies when you're dealing with, high availability and you're trying to work on performance, especially with, some sort of distributed system. And so a couple quick and easy examples, we use caching on the Order Solutions blog, for instance, to cache both user sessions. So if you're, visiting the site, logged in or not, as well as just the HTML content of the blog post. It's things that change very infrequently, but it's accessed often. So a typical caching strategy that we'll use on our servers is we'll have, a Couchbase cluster sitting behind either, Cachebox or just Lucy's cache aggregator. And we'll be, caching the HTML of the blog post inside of that. And having an external cache can be nice. External meaning not in your server's RAM, which would be an in-process cache. Having an out-of-process cache is nice because if you restart a server, you don't have to wait for those caches to warm up again. We can bounce the server when Lucy comes back up or ColdFusion comes back up. It's still pulling, hits in the cache mechanism since that's stored out of process.
Right. And then, of course, you can also cache queries as well. And
that's some really nice built-in functionality. So yeah, Adobe ColdFusion will only let you cache queries in the built-in EH cache. Lucy, Rilo will let you point your query cache to any external cache you want. So you can cache queries in Couchbase or in Memcached.
And I hadn't played with Couchbase as a caching solution.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of distributed database kind of thing.
It is. Couchbase is sort of a marriage between Memcached and CouchDB. And we're
Are they going to have children?
They did. It was called Couchbase.
Oh, okay.
Originally, it was called Membase, and they renamed it to Couchbase. We're big fans of that at Ortus. We use it for a lot of our stuff, and it combines both a NoSQL data store, including an actual SQL-like querying language. So you can cache JSON documents, but it also works as just a typical key value cache. So you can throw binary blobs in it. You can cache HTML, just text.
But it's a little bit like a CDN, it's spread out over several servers, probably geographically spread out.
Yes, it supports all that. You can have as many nodes in a Couchbase cluster. You can have cross data center replication. That's why we like it, because it's incredibly fault tolerant in its mechanisms.
And I just want to encourage people who want to speed up their apps, start off by looking at the SQL. As Bill Clinton might have said, it's the SQL stupid.
Well, I would also like to point out while we're here, Cachebox does end in box, but that's not a requirement to use ColdBox with it. Cachebox is something that comes along with ColdBox, but it's a standalone library. So if you have a legacy application or Fusebox Framework 1 and you want to drop in some caching, you can always drop in Cachebox all by itself for sure.
Cool. Well, here's the faster apps. Let's move on to question 29 on what miscellaneous frameworks are you using? And I just can't help but notice in this answer that every other answer ends in box. So, but the number one miscellaneous framework is Command Box, which is completely free. And
Yes.
Why would someone want to use that?
I'm glad you asked, Michael. If anybody doesn't know, I am the lead developer for Command Box, so it warms my heart to see good uptake on that. Command Box is a CLI tool, so it's a REPL, lets you kind of run ColdFusion directly from the command line. You can execute CFM files from a cron job or as a shebang script, but it also does package management. You can install libraries, you can install frameworks, and you can, most importantly, start servers. So it can start Lucy servers, it can start Adobe servers, any version.
So you could have like 4 different server versions, Adobe ColdFusion 11, Lucy 5, Lucy 4.
Exactly. All running
Adobe
at the same time.
2016.
Yep.
And you
Takes
could
care.
just spin them up
Mhm.
anytime
Yep.
and you
Takes
wouldn't.
care of the ports so nothing conflicts. We actually use command box in all of our Travis CI builds now, so we can test our frameworks like ColdBox against Lucy 4, Lucy 5, ColdFusion 10, ColdFusion 11, ColdFusion 2016, and it's all just based on command box. You just say,
Mm.
start the server and it boots it up. So,
All
and
right.
that's
And then,
that's actually when we saw command box usage really jump a lot, is when we added in the ability to start Adobe servers. I think a lot of
yeah.
are using that now as an alternative to actually installing, a specific version of ColdFusion, which is great.
And then Logbox, the second most used one by 27% of folks. Why would someone want to use that over just using CF Log?
Yeah, so like Cachebox, Logbox is something that is part of the ColdBox family, but it's a standalone framework, so you can use it in any application you want, even if you're not using ColdBox MVC. But Logbox lets you do similar to CF Log, but just much more flexible. You can, have a generic concept of I have a log message of this severity, and it can go to a text file, it can go to a database, it can go to an email, it can go to a Twitter feed. You can kind of dynamically at runtime provision where you want these log messages to be logged to, and that can be different per environment. So on dev you can say dump all log messages of any kind into a text file that gets zipped up every 10 megabytes, and then production maybe you have different settings for it. It can be very handy, especially if you're dealing with any kind of containerized deployment of your apps. Docker containers or things where you have these, there's no static file system underneath them. So it's important to be able to log your error messages outside. We have some custom appenders written for things like BugLog HQ. So we can have our servers all via Logbox logging any error messages on the site to some centralized BugLog HQ server. So it comes in very handy for situations like that.
Cool. And then next down here is FuseGuard. Why would someone want to use that?
Now, I wish more people were using FuseGuard. This is a product of Pete Freitag's from Foundio, and it's excellent. It's basically a web application firewall that's written in ColdFusion, and it will actually block a large number of known hack attempts from being able to hit your website. So if someone tries to exploit a vulnerable SQL statement with SQL injection, or exploit path transversal, exploits, this product of Pete's, which is a commercial product, but it's very well worth it, will actually detect those via some configurable heuristics, and it'll block those requests and even log them. So we've played around with that.
Definitely recommend doing something there. Either clean up your code to fix the holes, or use something like this. I mean, I guess this is similar to .NET. Is it .NET Defender? No, there's something that's like a generic version of this kind of thing, but this is called Fusion Pacific.
It's possible.
Yeah.
I think it's a fantastic product. Pete's really done a good job with that one, so I think more people should check into it. Also, on that note, if you're curious about your servers, Pete, the author of FuseGuard, also has a hackmycf.com website, which is a very cheap subscription you can pay, and it'll actually email you and tell you if you have any vulnerabilities in your website. It's a non-intrusive scanning that it does, and it'll alert you preemptively. You're behind on your updates. You need to lock down this directory. It'll scare you.
That's a great tool, and it will alert you if there's a patch being put out by Adobe. Just to be clear, that's just looking at the server side of things. It isn't checking code or stuff, whereas FuseGuard is actually protecting some holes you might have in your code. And we have a question a little bit further down where people admit to how much they've been hacked. So we'll look at that a bit later. And then two other tools here, miscellaneous frameworks, DocBox and ForgeBox. So just briefly, why would someone want either of those?
So very quickly, DocBox is the Ortus fork of the ColdDoc project, which I believe was Mark Mandel. It was no longer being maintained, so we kind of took it under our wing and rebranded it. But it allows you to generate HTML documentation of your CFCs. So we use that for all, the ColdBox, TestBox, all of our internal libraries. We have API docs you can use. We use DocBox to generate those. And ForgeBox is less of a tool, and it's actually a website. The forgebox.io website is where you host packages that you can install from command boxes, kind of part of our ecosystem. But it's not a requirement that it's, ColdBox specific. Anybody you know, if you have a library for, you know, creating ASCII art, whatever you want, you can put them on Forgebox.
And any, there were a lot of writing entries here of other tools people use. Any interesting ones you noticed? Or?
Let me take a quick check. Refresh my memory.
Let's see what comes up here.
I'd say a lot of these didn't belong in this category.
Test box.
Where they typed none.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we need a none in here for next year.
I like this. Command box deserves 2 because it's so awesome. I promise I didn't type that.
I believe you. So I think the takeaway from me on this is if you're not using some of these toolkits, some of which are free, some of which are paid, you're probably missing out, and worth checking out some of them. So let's move on to monitoring. Of course, none of us have slow or crashing ColdFusion servers, right?
Nope, not me.
No. But question 30 here, what monitoring tools are you using? And the number one tool is Fusion Reactor, which maybe is no surprise because it's the one that gets the best maintenance and new features added
Fusion
to
Reactor
it.
is very active. They have releases every month, probably. Maybe not quite that often, but I know they're always coming out with new releases.
And they're also very supportive of the ColdFusion community. I know they're sponsors of CF Camp and Into the Box, and I think they were sponsor of ND DevCon.
NC DevCon.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. The Fusion Reactor guys put a lot of effort into reaching out to the ColdFusion community.
Yeah.
It's worth noting, CFusion has not very many votes. It, as a product that kind of gone stale for a while. That's managed by WebApper.
Yep. Used to be a great product and still is okay, but it just hasn't been getting updates.
Yeah, well, they have recently released CFusion 5, which I thought I'd point out, which involves a lot of kind of cloud-based management and pricing. So it'll be interesting to see if CFusion picks up any usage, just kind of based on the fact that they're starting to push out some new versions of that.
Yeah, I've got a podcast interview with David Tattersall, who's the CEO of Integral, coming up in a few weeks, and apparently they've got a cloud-based version of Fusion Reactor. And
they do. It'll push the metrics from your websites to a cloud location where you can view them externally, which is actually pretty cool.
Yeah. So, and they've also got lots of other cool features like, you know, they can automatically restart the server. They can tell you when it's getting close to a memory limit or disk limit or whatever limits you put in. There's all kinds of cool things in there. And it also can help you debug. You know, if you've got something slow or crashing, it can help you identify the slow SQL or the slow ColdFusion files.
Yeah, and I am a little disappointed to see almost 20% of people saying they don't monitor their servers at all. Now, I don't know if it means that they don't personally monitor it, you know, and someone in the IT department does. But you know, hopefully,
I think I'm going to interpret that they don't. We need to rephrase the question. We don't use monitoring software tools or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of
do
people
that next year.
Will come on the mailing list or such, and they'll say, you know, I've got a page and it takes 10 minutes to run, and I don't know why, or it crashes my server. You know, and we'll ask, well, do you have Fusion Reactor or CFusion or something installed? And the answer is no. You know, and the fact of the matter is that they've wasted, you know, far more, you know, of their company's resources in their time than it would have taken just to purchase, you know, a product like this. And even, I mean, the ColdFusion Server Monitor, if you've got ColdFusion Enterprise, you already have a, you know, a monitor that's not nearly as well featured as Fusion Reactor, but it'll at least get you things like stack traces, you know, memory usage out of the box. But I think a lot of people just don't, I don't know if they're not sure how to use these tools or just, you know, don't take the time, but I think everybody should have some kind of, you know, monitoring solution under their belt that they can use to see what their code is doing.
Yeah, I'd recommend that.